Hello YouTube, I'm Foxy Flakes. Welcome to my channel. First, I just want to thank everyone who clicked on this video. It being my first video, I really appreciate all the views I can get on this. Anyways, right on with the video. Today we'll be talking about everyone's favorite adult-oriented late-night block, Adult Swim. Chances are you found out about Adult Swim because you were watching Cartoon Network as a kid, and suddenly the disclaimer came on screen, and you freaked the hell out. This is an experience a lot of us have been through, and really, in a strange way, it's what got us into Adult Swim. Anyways, this iceberg was created by Reddit user Wilfred Cthulhu. If you don't know what an iceberg chart is, let me give you a brief breakdown. It's just a way of organizing information where all of the most well-known stuff is at the top and all the dark and obscure stuff is at the bottom. Anyways, let's get right into it. Too Many Cooks was a short that aired on Adult Swim on October 28th, 2014 at 4 a.m. Remember that time for later. This was part of the infomercials bit. And it started off kind of normal as a cheesy sitcom that became a cop drama, that became a soap opera, that became a sci-fi space show. In all these different shows within the short, there was a serial killer that was, following and killing all the characters. At one point, even turning into a spaceship. On one episode of the Eric Andre show, Eric Andre actually shows Seth Rogen's real phone number on the screen. Seth obviously wasn't too happy with this and ended up receiving lots of unwanted calls and texts from people he didn't even know. This was his actual phone number at the time. I don't know if it still is. And it led to him actually having to ask Eric Andre to tell his fans to stop calling and texting him. Whether or not that worked, I'm not really sure. Every year, Adult Swim pulls some kind of prank on its viewers. Just this year, it had to do with the show that may or may not be aired, Learning with Pibby, in which a lot of the show being aired featured corruption and glitching, and all that was referenced from the sneak peek, I guess you would call it, for Learning with Pibby. The year before, it was Adult Swim Junior, in which it kind of made it a kid-friendly-esque type of channel. One year, even, they went through all the pranks from the previous years and just hyped up what it might be that year, and it ended up being no prank at all. This is an annual thing on the channel. Unedited footage of a bear was a bit on infomercials, which started off as actual unedited footage of a bear. Then it got interrupted by supposedly an ad for medicine. The medicine ad ends up becoming the actual premise of the whole bit, though, and the woman in the ad ends up abusing the medicine, becoming addicted to it, and it leads her down a dark path. I'm just going to leave it off there because there's a lot more to it that I can't even explain just in this little bit. It could get a video on its own. I just recommend you all check it out for yourselves. So apparently the creator of this iceberg swears that there is improv on Adult Swim shows. I couldn't find anything on the subject, but it wouldn't come as a surprise to me exactly, knowing the kind of laid-back nature of the network. That's all I really have to say about that. On January 31st, 2007, the city of Boston went into a bomb scare as LED lights of the Mooninites from Aqua Teen Hunger Force were placed all over the city. The LEDs featured Ignigna and Irv flipping the bird at all eyes who fell upon it, and was used as a promotional for the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie. It wasn't perceived that way, and then Adult Swim president Jim Sample stepped down, as it was pretty big controversy at the time. This entry is simply referring to the fact that the show The Heart She Hollers was pretty unpopular, but there were a lot of memorable bumps for it. This is mainly because of the fact that there was just a bunch of jump scares and unnerving nature in the bumps. The original sign-on for Adult Swim featured a bunch of old people swimming, hence the name Adult Swim. And it was met with a lifeguard that said, "Adult Swim, all kids out of the pool." That's pretty much it. This entry is referring to when The anime block Toonami from Cartoon Network returned via Adult Swim, and Tom, the host, who was previously on Cartoon Network and was kid friendly, introduced it by saying, "Toonami's back, bitches," and I think that just kind of caught everyone off guard. That's pretty much it. The Dawn is Your Enemy was a sign-off bump used by Adult Swim between 2005 and 2010. The point of the bump was to scare children who weren't supposed to be watching the network. The bump still airs to this day, but only on very rare occasions. The creepy image was met with unnerving music and was a source of nightmare fuel for many Gen Z kids. Space Ghost Coast to Coast and The Brack Show both aired before the block existed. This is because both of these shows were actually aired on Cartoon Network just very late at night before Adult Swim was even a thing. These were the first two shows on Adult Swim. Kraft Punk is a character on the Eric Andre show that no one really knows the true identity of. Some think it might be Eric Andre himself, some say it's Hannibal. In all honesty, I think this is one of the lesser interesting entries on the iceberg, simply because I don't think the answer is really as interesting as we're making out to be. It's probably just an intern wearing the suit. Space Dandy is technically original programming because it aired on Adult Swim before it did on any other platform, which sets it apart from pretty much any other anime that airs on Adult Swim or Toonami. Clark is a unnerving bump that aired on Adult Swim. It's just known for having a really kind of scary and really creepy atmosphere to it. It was named after the guy that made it. Earlier, I mentioned to remember the time 4 a.m. This is why. Because 4 a.m. is normally when Adult Swim airs its weird and creepy stuff. This is when Too Many Cooks and unedited footage of a bear would air. In one episode of the Joe Paris show, Joe goes to the grocery store and links a website. Well, doesn't link it. He says the website. Uh, and it allows you to go and suggest things that you think you should get at the store. This website, obviously, being called Joe Para Grocery Store Food List 1945.com. It's not it's not a very short name. In the video game Saints Row 3, there's a radio station you can access called The Swim, hosted by John from Delocated. It's a pretty interesting little Easter egg. Adult Swim has a tendency of putting off newer seasons for its shows for a long time. A good example of this is Rick and Morty, as the first and second seasons were over a year apart, and the second and third seasons were like 2 years apart. And this is just one example. They do this with almost all of their shows. Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force is in GTA 5 as a hidden Easter egg on one of the radio stations. He calls in complaining about the music that they're playing and tells them that it sounds like a dumpster being rolled down 5 flights of stairs. His exact words. Rude Removal was an episode of Dexter's Laboratory that was supposed to air on Cartoon Network but was banned for obvious reasons. It was pretty inappropriate for kids to watch. And for a while, it was more of a rumor or an urban legend than people actually thought it was a real episode. It was just rumored as, the episode of Dexter's Lab where they were swearing. But as it turns out, it was a real episode, and they aired it many years later on Adult Swim, which is definitely a more appropriate place to be playing that. In February 2019, Adventure Time, a Cartoon Network original, aired on Adult Swim. This lasted for about a whole month, but stopped almost immediately afterwards. It was pretty cool. Just the fact that Adventure Time was on Adult Swim for a little while. It's one of the greatest shows Cartoon Network ever made, and there's no denying that. So just seeing that, a few years after it stopped airing, come back on Adult Swim for people who probably did watch it as kids, it's pretty cool. The Eric Andre show is known for torturing its celebrity guests. They get away with this by sending a fake show to celebrities and their agents, but when they actually get on the show, it's what it normally is. Examples of this include when Jeanette McCurdy came onto the show. Eric didn't shower at all for an entire month prior to her coming on, and during her interview, he got up really, really close to her and made her uncomfortable just because he was really, really smelling bad by then. Another example is when Jack Black came on, they hooked him up to a lie detector. At least what they told him was a lie detector, and it was just a machine that shocked him every time he said anything, even if it was the truth. During the first season of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, we'd see kind of a card or bumper after the Cartoon Network logo that said Contact Ghost Planet, and it featured several ways to contact Ghost Planet. From what I can tell, this actually doesn't work. I tried calling the number and it just told me the line was busy. I haven't heard anything about actually being able to contact anyone from this, so I don't know. Kind of weird. Of course, the actual phone number featured has the area code for Atlanta, which is where Cartoon Network and Adult Swim are based. So it probably has something to do with someone at Cartoon Network. Futurama and Family Guy were both initially aired on Fox, but were canceled after their first seasons. They began to re-air on Adult Swim and regained popularity because of that, and Fox decided to renew them. Futurama did end up ending and stopped airing on Adult Swim, but most recently they have started to re-air Futurama. Family Guy, on the other hand, is still going, but is in um, under full ownership of Disney, so it's no longer available on Adult Swim. Throughout the night, Adult Swim's content kind of changes. It gradually gets a little more um, less family friendly and a little more surreal. I like to say that it's kind of an arch. Like at the beginning and end of Adult Swim on a broadcasting day, you're going to see some pretty tame stuff. This is where your King of the Hills and your Bob's Burgers are going to be. And the more you are in the middle is where you're going to see more of the fucked up stuff. That's pretty much what this entry is about. There's a noticeable contrast in the art style of Adult Swim shows. You'll have shows like Black Dynamite and The Boondocks, where the art style is really good, and you can see a lot of effort and detail being put into it. Then you'll see other shows like 12 Ounce Mouse or Home Videos, and it's just, well, the complete opposite of that. American Dad was initially owned by Fox, then sold the rights to TBS. TBS is owned by Turner, which owns Adult Swim, and because of that, Adult Swim technically, in a strange way, owns American Dad. This is why new episodes of American Dad might air on Adult Swim just a day or two after they air on TBS. Adult Swim has aired a ton of pilots. The most successful of their recent pilots having been Spawning Friends, which became a pretty decent show that I absolutely love, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this video love too. But of course, for every successful pilot, there's a bunch of unsuccessful ones. Just like any other network, there's been a ton of pilots that air on Adult Swim that we never heard from again. The original designs for the characters of Aqua Teen Hunger Force first appeared on an episode of Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Upon seeing the original designs, you can tell that there was some significant change when they were making the actual show, both in design and with the voices. Except for Meatwad, he pretty much stayed the same. One edition of Juxtaposed magazine featured Black Dynamite on the cover. That's pretty much it. I think the incredible art style part of this is just referring to the fact that it's one of the better animated shows, kind of alluding to one of the more previous entries. Adult Swim played a significant role in popularizing anime in the United States. This is because a lot of their earlier shows were anime, and the popularity has only gone up on Adult Swim, which is why they acquired Toonami as an actual anime block for the show. The truth is, anime probably wouldn't be nearly as popular in the US and the Western world as a whole if it weren't for Adult Swim. So you can take Adult Swim for the existence of weebs. It's not uncommon for some Hanna-Barbera assets to be shown in Adult Swim originals. A good example of this would be in the pilot for Aqua Teen Hunger Force, where the background was clearly something straight out of Hanna-Barbera. There's a lot of other shows that do this. Probably the most notable one would be Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. Aqua Teen Hunger Force was originally thought to be something different than what it ended up being. The pilot for the show was actually the second episode, which was created as a show in which the Aqua Teen Hunger Force would actually fight, villains and monsters and stuff. Because they thought that Adult Swim wouldn't greenlight a show that just has, a bunch of food doing random stuff. They ended up completely conning Adult Swim into greenlighting it, and it became one of the most successful series. Series? Series? Someone put in the comments what the plural for series is. I really don't know what it is. This House Has People in It was another one of those weird 4 a.m. airings that has a family that doesn't even try to come off as normal. Like, it's a weird ass family. A lot of weird things happen throughout the short. The dad is completely childish. They're eating clay for some reason, and at one point, the daughter starts sinking into the floor, completely unfazed for that matter. So it's a weird skit. You can go check it out yourself. But skit's actually pretty well known. The reason it's so far down on this iceberg is because of the rabbit hole that comes with it and all the um, fan theories that circulate around it. If you really want to go down that rabbit hole, the YouTuber Nightmind has a video on it that's even longer than the actual short. It has more views than the actual short. So if you're interested, go check that out. It's kind of a generally accepted idea that Rick and Morty ended after the second season. This is because characters kind of changed. Personality wise, the whole plots and stuff don't seem to fit the first two seasons. And fans just kind of um, in unison just accepted that the rest of the series doesn't really exist. That's also what this entry is referring to, as season 4 of the Boondocks didn't really match with the rest of the series, nor was it very popular, and, well, that's about it. The interview process for Space Ghost Coast to Coast is a little unconventional, seeing as it is actual people being interviewed for a cartoon. They had to improvise a little bit. So what they do is they'd ask celebrities the questions in the studio and record them answering. Except on the show, Space Ghost won't be asking them the actual questions, and it would just look like the celebrities didn't know what they were talking about. And it's pretty funny. Adult Swim used to air the kids show Pee Wee's Playhouse around midnight or so. This was before my time, so I'm just kind of speaking off what I've looked up here, but it's just kind of strange that Adult Swim would be playing that. Of course, then again, this is a network that's known for being kind of weird and goofy, so I guess it's not really too out of character for them. Movie Runs Wild is a short that occasionally airs on Adult Swim. Pretty much the whole premise of it is Boo Boo goes crazy because he's tired of all the rules that are being set up around the park that him and Yogi live in. I was lucky enough to be one of the few people to actually see this live. And if you recognize the art style, just because it's made by the same piece of human garbage that made Ren and Stimpy. Earlier Adult Swim would air original airings of the actual 1966 Space Ghost cartoon. They would add a laugh track in there to make it more comedic to kind of fit what the network was really about. Apparently, in the earlier years of Adult Swim, they had a bump about the Falcon Punch that Captain Falcon would do in Super Smash Bros. I haven't been able to find anything about this, but apparently a few select people have seen or heard of it. I'm not one of those people. I haven't been able to find any footage, and I don't ever recall seeing the Falcon Punch bumper. That's all I really got to say about this one. It's kind of a shared memory for people who grew up in the late 2000s to have been staying up all night for Adult Swim to come on so they could watch Full Metal Alchemist. It was one of the more popular animes at the time, so of course I was going to gain a lot of traffic from viewership. Eventually, Adult Swim actually caught on to this trend, and well, you're about to see what happened next. So when Adult Swim caught on to the trend of staying up late to watch Full Metal Alchemist, they decided to be a little devious and they did a little trolling. Pretty much, they teased that Full Metal Alchemist was going to be playing at a certain time, but at that time, instead, they would play FLCL, which is how a lot of people ended up discovering that show. This entry is simply referring to the Toonami bumper that would end by saying "Up next, Futurama." Bear in mind, this was airing at a time where Toonami was still on Cartoon Network, so them promoting a Adult Swim show was kind of odd at the time. Adult Swim has no shortage of unnerving bumpers. We've already covered Clark and the Dawn as your enemy, but this kind of works as a free space for any bumpers that really kind of gave you chills the first time you saw it. For me personally, watching is better than living was a really creepy one. I remember seeing it when I was like 14 and wondering if I was even still watching Adult Swim before I stumbled across something stranger. Let me know in the comments if you have any weird experiences with bumps. I'd like to check them out. These shows were originally pitched for Adult Swim but ended up on Cartoon Network instead. They mostly got the latest slot that Cartoon Network could offer, seeing as it was going to be on Adult Swim to begin with. A prime example of this is Problem Solvers, which looks like something straight out of Adult Swim. Anyone else who remembers that show, I feel your pain. I didn't like it either. Adult Swim has plenty of memorable bumpers that we remember less in a scary way and more in a fond way. I remember a lot of the nature bumpers, including the one with the pyramids that had the AS logo in between two of them, or the one with the owl sitting on a metal bar that read Adult Swim. Put in the comments some of your favorite ones. I'd like to see some of those. Aquatine Hunger Force was one of, if not the most successful show on Adult Swim, but it ended really quietly without any build up or any real announcement. The final episode ended up being posted online, again, without any announcement, and honestly, I think we can all agree that it deserved better. All Times of Music Eastern was a bump used by Adult Swim in the late 2000s and early 2010s that would show the schedule for the night. The song being used for the bump was Man Deer by Asian Beats Culture. It's a really nostalgic song to many, including myself, and just hearing it really takes you back to a different time. Longtime viewers of Adult Swim have shared memories of watching in the mid 2000s, many of which we've already covered on this iceberg, and we'll cover even more later. Unfortunately, I can't come into a personal standpoint on this entry, seeing as I was born in the early 2000s and didn't actually watch anything on Adult Swim until around 2011. As one can imagine, Adult Swim has been doing the April Fool's pranks for a long time, and because of that, the footage gets lost pretty easily. The best example of this is the first version of the April Fool's prank, where they drew mustaches and all the characters. Only a few seconds of this footage has actually been recovered. I couldn't actually find anything on this entry, but I think it's referring to sometimes they would air older Adult Swim shows on Adult Swim long after they stopped airing. I guess this is just for nostalgic purposes, most likely. I think they also use older bumps and sign-ons and sign-offs for that too. The dawn is your enemy comes with many myths and fan creations. One of the myths being about the sun winking, even though that's not much of a myth. It does in fact wink. Fan creations include the dawn is here to fame or the dawn is your doom. Some of these are even more terrifying than the original version. Adult Swim has a weird way of making you feel a certain way while watching it. Dan Tavis described this as comfortable melancholy, and I haven't heard or thought of a better term for it since then, so that's what we're going to go with. It always makes me feel a really strange way, but a way that I enjoy, that I like, and from what I can tell, this is how most people feel from watching Adult Swim. I think this one's more of a joke entry, but it kind of makes sense. Seeing as the band members from Metalocalypse have a tendency of acting like children, it just kind of ties it into Rugrats, which is a show about children, toddlers, really. So I guess really in a way that thinking of it like that just kind of makes Metalocalypse even more fun to watch than it already was. That's all I already have on this one. According to the creator of the iceberg, there was a sneak peek for Pirates of the Caribbean on Adult Swim at one point. He appears to be the only person who remembers this. Apparently, it was green text on a black background. It gave an oddly specific time, like 12:05, and the sneak peek never actually happened. It's probably one of the biggest mysteries on this iceberg. Sunday Pants was a show that initially aired on Cartoon Network, but only for a short amount of time due to poor ratings. Pretty much the whole premise of the show was to change art styles and have kind of vulgar animations that weren't really suitable for Cartoon Network. The theory is that this was initially for Adult Swim, but they couldn't find a time slot on the network, so they just gave them the latest Cartoon Network slot. SCP means secure, contain, protect. The SCP Foundation centers around keeping these mysteries away from the general public. Adult Swim is thought to be an SCP, seeing as it has a strange aura to it. Seeing the fact that it remains so popular despite the fact that it seems very few people understand most of it kind of adds to the mystery about it. Not to mention the odd melancholic feelings previously mentioned. SpongeBob SquarePants made Nickelodeon far more mainstream than it was initially supposed to be. It was originally going to be a network for kids, by kids, but after SpongeBob became a commercial success, they decided to be more commercial overall. This made Nickelodeon become somewhat a lot more soulless, and it very well could happen to Adult Swim, with Rick and Morty being its own SpongeBob. Every viewing of Adult Swim being personalized could answer every single question this iceberg has brought about. This could explain why there are so many features and bumpers that many people have seen, but many others haven't. Of course, that could also just be a pure coincidence, but seeing as the massive ratios between have and haven't seen on a lot of these, it could explain a lot. You never know. Thanks for everyone who made it to the end of the video. Thanks to everyone who clicked on the video. Really, I really appreciate all the views I can get on this. I'm sorry about any bad or weird sounding audio. This obviously being my first video, I wasn't going to perfect it the first time, but I'm hoping that this channel will get off to a running start, and I appreciate everyone who's helping me. Till then, take care.